would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. We're going to kind of dive right into the supposed reported chemical attack on Syria. Anymore we already kind of look at everything fishy. So I really wanted to kind of start looking at this as, did this really happen? But it just, from the beginning, it seemed fishy, taking it that really, if you look at Syria in the past months, it's really been ignored anymore because Russia and Assad actually have been fighting back quite a bit of, whether you want to label them rebels or ISIS or Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, they've had some success. And when you look at it, you can go, well, they're in a position of not looking, as bad as they could. For them to try to do something like that seems like it would be just a bad decision all around, strategically and in a PR, view, and really unnecessary. They wouldn't need to use that type of, I just don't see any type of justification that the Syrian government did that. But still going, I still could be wrong. I keep looking at it, and it seems the further I dig, the more it seems unlikely, and it seems like more of a strategic move to justify more military involvement. That's what I get from it. I have a few articles, one from Anti-Media, another one from RT, which of course, yes, it's a Russian, we expect there to be pro-Russia or pro-Syria, leaning out of that, but we will cover that. We also have one from We Are Change. And I really want to get into the article from We Are Change. But first, we're going to go ahead and dive into a Ron Paul Liberty Report, and, you know, he asked the questions whether this is a false flag or not. And, you know, from more reliable reporters, those independent reporters that are going in there, and time after time, it seems that these more independent reporters are all saying the white hats are not what they seem to be. And it's only the mainstream media that's covering it. And, you know, the moment this happened, it's, you know, the white hats. And it seems more and more that the white hats tend to be more of a propaganda group. And we've also seen, you know, the videos that have come out where there was that car bomb that went off in the video, and then you see them, you know, lay down in the street and act, you know, and then, oh, here comes the ambulance, and oh, they're all hurt. And we've seen that video, and it just seems way too staged. But let's go ahead and get in this Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Today with me is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. Yesterday, there was some bombing with possibly gas exposure in Syria, and things have changed. It reminds me sort of weather reports. Well, if you don't like the weather, just wait an hour. You know, you'll get different weather. Well, that's sort of what happens in the Middle East sometimes. That just wait, it'll change.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, before this episode of possible gas exposure and who did what, things were going along reasonably well for the conditions. You know, Trump says let the Syrians decide who should run their country, and peace talks were breaking out, and Al Qaeda and ISIS were on the run, on maybe defeated. So it was like, you know, in spite of their problems with this foreign policy, it looked like there was some benefit, but it looks like maybe somebody didn't like that, so there had to be an episode. And the blame now is that we can't let that happen because it looks like it might benefit Assad. So Assad, they claim, now went and released gas to kill a bunch of people. But, Daniel, we might not have much of a job here today because I looked at the New York Times to find out, to get the explanation, and they said, worst chemical attack in years in Syria. U.S. blames Assad. So it's all over and done with. But not quite so easy, is it? What happened 4 years ago in 2013, you know, this whole thing about crossing the red line, and ever since then, the neocons have been yelling and screaming. Even part of the administration is still yelling and screaming about Assad using poison gases on his people 4 years ago. Not quite true.
Yeah, it was never proven, in fact. And the UN official Carla Del Ponte said that attack was most likely done by the rebels based on the evidence. But here you have Nikki Haley, U.S. ambassador to the UN, almost as we speak, literally at the UN Security Council, saying, quote, "We know Assad has used chemical weapons before." It's not true. It has never been proven that he has. He may have. We do know that the rebels have used them. That has been proven.
And who would benefit? It makes no sense, even if you were totally separate from this and take no sides of this, and you were just an analyst. It doesn't make any sense for Assad in these conditions to all of a sudden use poison gases. It's zero. I think it's zero chance that he would have done this, deliberately, and he's doing this now. But we could also go to a famous senator who's an expert on foreign policy, and we could go ask John McCain to explain it, and he found somebody to blame. And I don't know what he has it in for the president. We criticize our president once in a while, and we try to be, balanced and criticize the things we think he's doing that we don't like. But McCain says, blame Trump. It's all Trump's fault because he hasn't been aggressive enough. He's backing off. He wants to have negotiations when you have to get rid of Assad. So he's backing prior to 2011 when the neocons, which are in cahoots with a few allies like Saudi Arabia and Israel, the Sunnis, and the Iranians, they're all, in cahoots together. So therefore, they have to be destroyed.
Yeah, and it's, the fact is, as you point out, we're on the eve of peace talks, literally on the eve of peace talks. Assad has the upper hand in these talks. He's almost, essentially, with his Russian and Iranian allies, wiped al-Qaeda and ISIS out of the country. So on the verge of this great victory that they've suffered for all these years, he decides, I think I'm going to go out and kill some people with gas. And if he just wanted to kill people, there are a heck of a lot better ways of doing it than using gas, which just guarantees that the entire world community, including your allies, are going to turn against you. As you say, he would have to be the most insane leader probably in the history of the world, a Caligula or something.
Well, the collusion of several groups, and we might throw pro-oil people in and pro-military industrial people that is in this effort to continue wars going on. But I think it's the same group of people we dealt with when we were trying to prevent, the remaking of the Middle East under Bush and his marching in to have regime change in Afghanistan and Iraq, and look at the results there. But they never learned from this. So they just shift gears, go to Libya. If it doesn't work, let's go over now. And maybe they consider they've had a tremendous success in Ukraine or something. But now it's Syria, and they're into it. But they're all coming together. And when you look up at what they do, is they do have to get some type of public support for the war. Although they're behind the scenes, the neocons and the deep state, they're making the plans, they rule the day, but they still know that they have to use their propaganda machine to get the people behind them. And I think that is what's going on. They did that in Iraq successfully because people believed Saddam Hussein was a monster, and they sort of forgot about it. The people allow the Congress to keep spending all this money, to remake the Middle East. Keeps getting worse, but a lot of people, hopefully we can make inroads, in the public perceptions of this, that this makes no sense whatsoever to just blindly support this policy. So the interesting thing, of course, and it's very important, is how's Trump going to handle this? The first statement I heard, Assad's a bum, we got to go after him. He was really, really tough. And the next time it wasn't so tough. So he almost had two answers. It wasn't, no, I don't think it was him. We don't need to escalate. We need to find out more what's going on. It doesn't make any sense that he's done that. So he's sort of in between on this. And it's important. Now, if you go to Haley, and other military people that are in the administration, they're gung-ho sometimes to support the neoconservatives. But it's the neoconservatives who are benefiting tremendously from this, because it's derailed the progress that has already been made moving toward a more peaceful settlement in Syria.
Yeah, and the loss of the rebels. But, I think it's the reaction is epitomized by Boris Johnson, who's the UK foreign minister. Here's what he said. All evidence points to the Assad regime. In the next sentence, he called for a thorough and international investigation. Well, how do you have all the evidence pointing to someone if you haven't had the investigation yet? And I think it's interesting that the initial stories about this attack came from two sources. One of them is an NGO based in the UK that's not even in Syria, and the other is a US-funded group called the White Helmets, very controversial group because they work very closely with al-Nusra Front in Syria. Both of these groups are paid for by the US and UK government, so you at the very least would have to be suspicious about these reports. And plus, I've seen pictures that the White Helmets have put up of them handling these people supposedly hit with sarin gas, but they didn't have any protection. And everything I've read about sarin is that it's absorbed through your skin.
Remember the prop they used leading up to the Iraq War of taking babies out of incubators. Yeah. It was all staged, a paid PR firm in the United States using people in the United States to claim that as a story. But, McCain actually made fun of the notion when Trump came out with a reasonable statement. Let the Syrians decide about this. It's just this whole thing. He says, how can they do it? And he argues that what right do they have to decide their own country? But that would be the argument for why should we be there? Even at all? Why wouldn't we let the Libyans and the Syrians and the Iraqis and the Afghans let them all decide? But that's not that option's not usually on the table. There's another option that they throw out there.
And what a hypocrite he is, because here's the same guy who's screaming about the Russians interfered in our elections, and then he says, oh, no one else is allowed to decide their own.
Right.
But here's another good example, Adam Kinzinger, a Republican of Illinois. And this shows the mentality of many people in Congress. And so people think that these people are statesmen and they're so well versed. This is what he said. I think there needs to be punishing strikes against the Syrian regime as a result of this. You could hit the command and control centers, cutting Assad off from his military forces. But what he's calling for is literally World War III. And even if it wasn't, even if the Russians stood back and let us do this to bomb and kill the Assad regime, how many thousands and thousands of people would be killed if the U.S. started bombing Damascus over this tragic figure of apparently around 100 people killed in this attack? You're going to have tens of thousands killed in Damascus. This is so irresponsible.
It's always the children that they show it, and then they say that it's Assad. It has nothing to do with our policy. But, the blatant episode leading up or at the time the Iraq war was going on, remember Albright was being questioned, that there was a report out that 500,000 women, children died from our bombing over a 10-year period. We kept bombing and destroying infrastructure and all that. And she didn't deny it. She says, well, if that's the cost, it is. We have to have it. So this idea that they can show a child and say that child's been gassed, and it was Assad's fault, and therefore we have to bomb everybody and kill a lot more people, then who knows what will happen. See, what they're betting on is those who are shouting that maybe they can just stop the peace talks, but they don't believe our policies will lead to a hot war with Russia. I don't happen to believe it will either, but do you think there's a guarantee that something like that couldn't happen? And even if it doesn't, just destroying what's left of Syria by outside forces, by individuals who were not invited into Syria. There's a few people who are there that have been invited and a few that have not been. And we happen to be on the side of the people who have not been invited in to help bring the peace to Syria.
And, if Kinzinger and people like him get their way, Syria will be ruled by, best case scenario, ISIS or Al-Qaeda, or it'll turn into another Libya. But, people would say, if watching the show right now, they'd say, you guys are just a couple of apologists for Assad. Well, we're not, as you know. The fact is, as you pointed out earlier, we don't believe the lies. And we believe now that we're being told lies like we were in Libya, like we were in Iraq. It has nothing to do with whether we like or dislike Assad or think he's a good guy or a bad guy. It has to do with being lied to.
And this is the reason that, Russia came up with the explanation. They didn't say that they weren't dropping bombs because they're trying to, win the war for Assad. Everybody knows that. But what they're saying is that that they accidentally or they hit a target which had weaponry in it and they had gas in there and that released the gas. That's what the Russians say. For some reason, I don't even think that is the case, even though I have no idea. But if you're looking for a reasonable explanation of it, there's somebody has been involved. If it turns out there's gas, like you say, they don't even know it. If there's gas, but if there was gas involved, then it was probably inspired by some of our sinister forces because we're always involved. I mean, did we have a change of administrations in Ukraine without NATO and the United States and CIA and special forces? No, that's how it happens. So why would why would this, which is a significant event, maybe it'll blow over and people forget about it and say, oh, yeah, that's another episode. It might not blow over again, but it just looks like it's not an accidental event, and it looks like it makes no sense that Assad is ready to commit suicide,
Literally,
because they could, United States and the British and other, but we have a lot of warplanes. We could just destroy the rest of the country, and some of these people act like they would, you know.
And, if he was keen on just killing people, then why is Aleppo, now that the terrorists are out, why is it rebuilding? You see pictures of it rebuilding. Why isn't he in there killing people if that's just what he likes to do? That doesn't make...
It makes no sense whatsoever, but I think it's a reflection of a consequence of our foreign policy, and we shouldn't be surprised. It's a little different this time, but, in time, in a couple weeks or maybe a month or so, or ultimately it'll be always used for propaganda. Although we did get to as close to the truth as conceivable about Assad not using gas 4 years ago, it's still a propaganda tool. Even half of the Trump administration still uses that against Trump. So it's real hard to cancel out these images, and they're still going to say that. So how would you put all this together, and what do you think might happen?
Well, I think you're right. The propaganda value is so strong. Even if a couple weeks down the road it doesn't look so much like he did it, it's already established. And the one final word that I would, Nikki Haley, I think, is one of the worst people in the administration. Here is just a couple of days after a terrorist attack in Russia, in St. Petersburg. And she was at the UN Security Council today saying, how many more children have to die before Russia cares? Just after they're victims of this attack. So
it's always about the children. So, well, I'll tell you what, if we really cared, we wouldn't even be in that country, I'll tell you that. I think Trump had it absolutely right. Let the Syrians decide what to do about their government. The Syrian people ought to make the decision. And that's a term that's been used generously by a lot of our leaders. Certainly Woodrow Wilson preached self-determination, but look at the consequence of that mess. And that's why I think that we have to look at a bigger picture than just strategy. Whether we bomb here tomorrow, the next day, or we move troops here, do we support this troop? It's like interventionism in economic policy. You can't plan the economy through monetary manipulation, and you can't plan to run the world and control the world and bring all the factions together by manipulating particular events. You have to decide what you stand for, preach the lessons at home, set good examples, and don't try to force your views on other people. Don't try to use it, guns and bombs and missiles, and say you do it our way or not. So right now, the president's going to be meeting with the president of China, and I don't think that it should be intimidation. I think it should be a frank discussion. But this idea, do it my way or else, it just won't work. I just don't know why we should give up on the principle of negotiation and diplomacy. If we give up on that, then we're going to have the neoconservatives epitomized by Bill Kristol and Cheney and McCain and Lindsey Graham, the other ones who will be running it. And in many ways, they have a lot of influence. I mean, they're closer to the insiders. They're closer to the deep state, and their message keeps getting out. And this may well be an example of what they can do to reverse any attempt to come up with a peaceful solution. That is why the message of non-interventionism, mind our own business, have a strong national defense, protect liberty here at home, that is the policy that must be used if we are determined to promote the cause of peace and prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out, subscribe. Now, again, the whole basis of, why would Assad do this? It really, he would have to be completely mad, and that's not what you're seeing out of Assad. This more than likely is some sort of false flag. By who? I don't know. Okay, that was kind of weird. So I came across this article out of wearechange.org. False flag in Syria. Journalists raise alarms on gas attack. Two prominent journalists with experience on Syria believe the recent gas attack was a false flag designed to make the Trump administration go to war on Assad. And this was posted today. Sarah Abdallah noticed something strange that a Syrian reporter for Gulf-based Orient TV tweeted about the attack 24 hours before it took place. Abdallah translates the reporter's tweet. This is quote, tomorrow a media campaign will begin to cover intense air raids on the Hama countryside and use of chlorine against civilians, unquote. Another reporter, Mimi Al-Laham, known as Partisan Girl, said, quote, this shows clear foreknowledge that the rebels were going to stage an attack by Orient TV, unquote. Al-Laham also reported that the White Helmets, an Al-Qaeda affiliated group funded by George Soros and the British government, were responsible for the chemical weapon attack on civilians in the Syrian city of Khan Shaykhun. She goes on to state in another coincidence that 250 people were kidnapped by Al-Qaeda last week from the nearby city of Hama, which is the same number as the current body count of wounded and killed civilians. Laham further noticed that the media's narrative was quickly changed from nerve agent to sarin to chlorine. She added that the media is quick to believe anything without any evidence. She also exposed one of the media's sources, a Dr. Shahjun Islam, who is facing terror charges for kidnapping, torturing two British journalists in Syria. In another case of coincidence, Partisan Girl explains that the White Helmets received serum protective respirator suits 1 month before the attack, despite the Syrian government no longer owning sarin gas, according to OPCW and John Kerry himself, as Abdallah points out. We will leave you with a very thought-provoking question from the Syrian deputy ambassador. Who is the beneficiary of chemical attacks? Is it terrorist forces that seek to topple our government? Syrian deputy ambassador at UNSC. And I'm not going to read the one, but if you go to RT News, they have the article that Ron Paul was talking about where they're claiming that airstrike hit a ammunitions building factory or, retrofitting place or something where rebels were making gas something. I don't quite believe that either. Like Ron Paul said, I think what they're trying to do is saying that if any of their air raids did anything, that's why it would have happened. From anti-media, on Tuesday, yet another chemical weapons attack occurred in Syria. This particular attack took place in the Idlib province, and dozens have reportedly died as a result. Syria is no stranger to chemical weapons attacks. In 2013, there were two notably devastating attacks, both of which the Obama administration used to try to justify a direct strike on the Assad government. The UN thoroughly investigated the first 2013 attack. The UN Commission of Inquiry's Carla Del Ponte ultimately said the evidence indicated the attack was carried out by the Syrian rebels, not the Syrian government. Despite this, support for the Syrian rebels from the U.S. and its allies only increased, raising serious questions about Obama's sincerity when condemning chemical attacks. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh found the second major attack was committed in a similar manner. Hersh found that the U.S. quite deliberately attempted to frame the evidence to justify a strike on Assad without even considering al-Nusra, a terror group with access to nerve agents that should have been a prime suspect. In 2016, the UN concluded that the Syrian government had indeed used chemical weapons during the years-long conflict, but that ISIS had too. This is in light of the fact that in 2013, the UN also declared that the regime no longer possessed chemical weapons. These facts are largely missing from any serious commentary on the most recent attacks in Syria, despite these reports being accessible and available. The world has instead decided to blatantly ignore them and rush to blame Assad once again. It is also worth noting that one of the sources blaming Syria and or Russia for this attack is the so-called Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, an organization run by a single anti-Assad dissident in Coventry, England. Having these claims bolstered by the White Helmets does nothing to aid its credibility, given the group's leadership is reportedly driven by a pro-interventionist agenda conceived by the Western governments and public relation groups that back them, according to Alternet. Yet, without directly confirming any of the intelligence, the media and politicians are out in full force condemning the Assad government. As of this article's publication, The Guardian has three top headlines, one reporting the attack and the next two condemning Assad directly. Even a New Zealand newspaper, the New Zealand Herald, ran an ambitious article entitled "Donald Trump is the only leader who can stop Syrian atrocities." No, it is not the Onion. In the article, the writer ignores all the aforementioned reports regarding attacks in 2013, claiming that in that year the Syrian regime used sarin. She also claims Obama did nothing in response. The claim that Obama did nothing makes no sense. In 2016 alone, Obama dropped over 26,000 bombs, almost half of which landed in Syria. These bombs also rained on Syrian troops in direct violation of international law. As President Obama also oversaw the CIA's expenditures of about $1 billion a year training Syrian rebels. As fears of fake news perpetuated by both the mainstream media and the president threaten our democratic institutions, how else can we describe these biased reports on Syria, if not fake news? News should be based on evidence, not molded around foreign policy agenda of regime change. Perhaps the Syrian government did use chemical weapons in a stupid move that would immediately attract international commendation and calls for war just days after the U.S. openly acknowledged they would consider leaving Assad alone. But what if the Syrian government wasn't responsible and the attack was once again committed by the Syrian rebels? Will the world unite and join Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard in her calls to stop arming terror groups in Syria? Or is it that we only care about chemical weapon attacks if there is an indication that the Syrian government was behind it? One should bear in mind that if the rebels did commit the attack, the U.S. could actually do something about it, considering America and its allies actively support them. Withdrawing support for groups that resort to these tactics would contribute to Syria's safety and security. This is not a concern, however, because it appears the media's ultimate focus of the story is to garner support for further war and bloodshed in the Middle East, not less of it. And that was from Anti-Media, theantimedia.org. Excuse me. Now, it's pretty convenient too that Turkey was meeting with Trump today, did a press conference and talking about support for them. Right now, everything going on in the Middle East, I really don't trust any side because there's too many people working against each other, and they're both using propaganda. And again, the only people suffering is the everyday person that's just trying to live their life. And they do the same thing with propaganda here, the war on drugs. You can make the argument because it's supported by a lot of evidence that the war on drugs is committed just as much, devastation and travesty as drugs themselves. Some will make the argument that it's done more because what you tend to find is the more you outlaw some, the more it tends to get used, and the more crime and everything else that comes with it being illegal. Prohibition was a perfect example when they had the prohibition on alcohol and bootlegging and Al Capone, and it was a recipe for disaster. Why did we think the war on drugs would be any different? It's that hero complex that these people believe, oh, we're so elite and we're so knowledgeable. We know what's best for others. And they really don't. They only know what's best for them. And that involves being able to hold on to power over others. Propaganda is part of that. Give me a second here. Sorry, I'm just trying to get it to load here. Okay. Maybe. Sorry, guys. We're going to move ahead to something else because that website just has too many ads. And it's fine when I don't have so much open and running on the broadcast, but once I got all of this running on so little equipment, any website with too many ads bogs us down. We're going to move ahead to some more, U.S. news. I have one here, and this has to do with the future of legal pot under Trump. I'm going to play this just from Reason TV. It's a real short clip, and we're going to talk about this.
2016 was a good night for Donald Trump.
I love this country. Thank you very much.
But it was also a great night for marijuana. California, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Maine all approved legalization of recreational cannabis. And Florida, North Dakota, and Arkansas legalized medical marijuana. All told, more than half the states in America have legalized the drug in one form or another. So how will the Trump administration deal with pot, which, after all, is still illegal under federal law? On the campaign trail, Trump seemed friendly to the notions of medical marijuana and leaving the rest to the states.
I think medical should happen, right? Don't we agree? I think so. And then I really believe you should leave it up to the states. It should be a state situation.
But signals from his administration have been more mixed.
There is still a federal law that we need to abide by in terms of the medical, when it comes to recreational marijuana.
I, as you know, am dubious about marijuana.
We asked cannabis industry professionals what they see for the future of legal weed in the Trump era.
I see the future of the marijuana industry under the Trump administration as, in the short term, a little cloudy. But when I say cloudy, it doesn't mean the skies are dark. It just means it's unclear.
I can never figure out whether it's art of the deal or not. How much of it's rhetoric and how much of it is going to actually come to pass.
I want a little more clarity before I'm able to really give my opinion.
Trump's Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is a longtime drug warrior, but even he seems reluctant to commit to a full-on crackdown.
As states, can pass whatever laws they choose, but I'm not sure we're going to be a better, healthier nation that if we have marijuana being sold at every corner grocery store.
Attorney General Sessions doesn't have to worry because that's not how the industry works. It takes a long time to get either a municipal or county permit, and there are highly regulated stores that track seed to sale.
There's code. You don't open up near a school. The people going into these dispensaries to purchase such product have to be of age.
I think the sitting Attorney General is an older gentleman who grew up in a certain context, and we're all victims of our own context and history. So I understand his position and why he has those deep-seated feelings.
Marijuana is a cure for opiate abuse. Give me a break. This is the kind of argument that has been made out there to just almost a desperate attempt to defend the harmlessness of marijuana or even its benefits. I doubt that's true.
Much of modern science contradicts Sessions' dim view of marijuana's therapeutic potential. with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine finding conclusive evidence that cannabis is an effective treatment for chronic pain after surveying 10,000 scientific studies on the matter. Nonetheless, the federal government continues to keep marijuana in its most highly controlled category, Schedule 1, and recognizes no currently accepted medical use, citing high potential for abuse. With Sessions helming the Department of Justice, this classification seems unlikely to change anytime soon, meaning the tension between state and federal law will remain.
When you look at it being on Schedule 1, it's a bit absurd because the definition of Schedule 1 is highly addictive and no medical uses. And cannabis couldn't be further from the truth on both those criteria. So at the end of the day, the truth is marching forward.
While crackdowns on medical cannabis seem unlikely given Trump's public statements and overwhelming public support for medicinal use, what about recreational marijuana? After all, that's a distinction Trump's press secretary, Sean Spicer, was careful to make in his comments.
The states where it's allowed, in accordance with the appropriations rider, have set forth a process to administer and regulate that usage versus recreational marijuana. That's a very, very different subject.
With the largest state in the union legalizing recreational weed, the feds would need to devote major resources to crack down. And that seems like a fight most Americans aren't up for either, with 71% of Quinnipiac poll respondents opposed to the federal government enforcing laws against marijuana in states that have legalized medical or recreational use. This disapproval of federal encroachment on state laws is pretty consistent across partisan lines.
I've always been a believer in federalism and states' rights. I think that it's up to societies and communities to dictate for themselves what rules they choose to govern themselves by. Hopefully, moving forward, the administration will have an open mind about it and be ready to listen to see how beneficial this has been in the areas where it's been tried.
If I were in an elevator and had an opportunity to speak to Donald Trump directly, I'd probably invite him for a drink or ask him to sit down over a meal, break some bread, and give me the opportunity to educate him about the true data of the cannabis industry. It's a job creator. I'm not saying I'm in favor of building a wall, but if you want to build a wall, there's potentially a couple $2 billion worth of excise tax revenue.
I don't see anyone pumping the brakes on this big industry. I see it expanding and doing better and helping more people.
Again, Reason TV on YouTube or Reason.com. Check them out on YouTube. Subscribe. Now, not only, one thing Trump ran on too is bringing jobs back to America. We can look at the whole marijuana issue, but let's also look at the issue of something that's been tied to marijuana because it's related to marijuana. And that's hemp. Industrial hemp there's no THC in it. They said it would take something like a telephone pole size joint or something to get the THC from a regular, marijuana joint. When you look at that combined with the marijuana, the potential job growth from stuff like that, definitely in the hemp industry, because we import hemp and we can't just grow it. Industrial hemp is used in so much things, and the ability of our agricultural center here in America is actually prime for hemp production, which also would allow for less forestry. So when we do have forestry, we have plenty of it. And technology has made it where, that would be a choice. It wouldn't be so bad because, well, the people that cut it down get paid good. You still pay regular price, but you might be able to get a hemp made product, kind of like a bamboo made product, but grown here. You don't have to wait too long for it to grow. There's so many possibilities. Then you bring, medical marijuana, where they are finding all these uses that, are being more and more research and more, confirm that, hold on, there is something here. Well, we should already know that. I think if you had a decent science class in school, K through 12, you should understand that, well, most medications and things that, where does all this come from? Where do, Oxycontin come from? It's an opioid. These things come from plants. So, saying there's no uses for marijuana, but there is for opium, because, well, why is one more than the other? They do make money off both. The war on drugs makes money off of things, and then, it's just, it's been propagandized, and I think there are too a lot of older people that they're so set in their ways and set in their beliefs that they won't look at new evidence. I hope I never get that way. I'm always trying to, open up to new things, but I also try to look at reality. But believe me, my mind gets blown all the time. I'm like, whoa, I didn't notice that, or I didn't think about it that way. And I think that's only beneficial. Let's never try to close our mind off to the possibility. I might believe something, but I might also be open to the possibility of something different. And even if I don't usually, there's been issues that I've looked at, and I believe one thing, but then I've seen evidence that made me go, I don't know if I believe that, but there's enough there to say that what I was believing before cannot be the truth. Doesn't mean I fully believe the other side. I try to find what I believe from the truth that I see on both sides. So it's one of those things that I believe there's partial people that know that, there are benefits. They rather make money off of it. Then I think there's old folks that, they're set in their ways. And again, hopefully, we can continue to expand our minds, not close off the possibility. And we have to break through a lot of the propaganda from all the different industries that fight against it. And we also know that it's not supposed to just be something cool to do. We can't make it the next cigarette. We can't make it something that becomes harmful to society. And luckily, cigarettes have diminished, and sad to say I'm a smoker, but I've tried to cut back and working on quitting. Good luck with that. No, I really do want to quit, but it's also my choice. You know, Ron Paul, I remember in one of his campaigns, he was talking about legalization. He said, legalize it all. You know, it's not what you choose to put in your body. It's the choice that you make to put something in your body that can harm you, or, you know, the choices you make when you're on something. Just because, you know, alcohol is legal or someone does something stupid on alcohol doesn't say we should make it illegal. It didn't work. You know, you have to make those decisions. Am I going to get drunk and, you know, drink and drive and kill someone, or am I going to be responsible? You know, it's a choice that we make. And the thing is we've outlawed things that do less harm to the people and, you know, the others around them. Now, I have this article here from Reason.com. I'm going to move along here. This one really got me. Chicago mayor threatens teens' diplomas unless they participate in approved post-school education. Hey, Chicago kids, if you're expecting your high school diploma, you're going to have to tell your school what you plan to do with it. Oh, and if you're not going to do what the Chicago public school system wants you to do with your diploma, they might not give you one. The city of Chicago has so ineptly financed itself that it has to tax the crap out of its citizens, literally, just to try to keep its underfunded city employee pensions afloat. It is so dysfunctional that it's the only top 10 city in America that's losing population. Yet today, Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel has decided that the failure of teens to map out their post-secondary education future is a big enough problem that the city's bureaucrats need to get involved. And that's what they're going to do, is such a brilliant example of how disastrous central plan governance is. The school system is going to withhold diplomas from graduating high school seniors until they provide the school system information about their post-school plans. And be very clear, this is not a choose your own post-education adventure. You will choose from one of 4 government-approved options. If you want a diploma, you will be required to provide proof you've been accepted to a 4-year college, a community college, a branch of the armed services, or a trade school or program. That's it. That's what the city of Chicago has decided your choices for success are after you graduate high school. Got an entrepreneurial spirit? Go get an official post-secondary stamp of approval with a business degree, kid, or else it doesn't count. Part of a family-owned business, the city plans to regulate and tax them out of existence anyway. There's an entire list of ways this demand offends the conscience. First and most obvious, it treats people who are becoming adults as though they are wards of the state and withholds a diploma that they've earned unless they provide information to the Chicago public school system that they have no authority to even ask for. Second, note that how all of these post-school options tie the teen further to environments subject to continued government control and operations even after reaching adulthood. Granted, both the colleges and trade schools could be private privately operated, but both are heavily dependent on government grants and subject to significant government control. Third, since the demand requires merely acceptance and not actual commitment to attend, at least that's what the report is saying now, and community college accept pretty much everybody. It's just insulting bureaucratic busy work when all is said and done. They can't take your diploma back if you get accepted into college and then don't attend. And that just makes it all more offensive. It's paternalistic government nudging designed to socialize and fundamentally trick teens into thinking that this is the sum of all their choices after graduation. Fourth, imagine being a teen and not grasping the busy work nudging nature of this demand, concluding post-secondary education is out of reach for you for whatever reason, and believing that you have to join the military in order to get your diploma. And finally, this is clearly a jobs program, but not for these students. It's a jobs program for secondary educators and administrators, an attempt to force an increase in demand through this not so subtle coercion. Emmanuel pretty much said so himself. Starting with the freshman class right now in high school in Chicago, by the time they come to graduation, they'll have basically, think of it this way, you want to make 14th grade, not high school, universal and people's educational program, he said. And what I mean by this is if you graduate, you'll have to have a letter of acceptance from a college, a letter of acceptance from a community college, or a letter of acceptance from the armed services, or a letter of acceptance from a trade, carpenter or electrician. Note that Emmanuel is confusing universal with mandatory here. This is the first step in pretty much mandating post-secondary educations for people who might not and perhaps should not be otherwise pursuing them. And according to the Chicago Tribune, this rule is supposedly coming into place starting with students who graduate in 2020. Hey, notice that date there? Remember Agenda 21? Now they're calling Agenda 2030, but they're moving it off in plans in a lot of major cities around the nation. And they're calling it, Vision 2020, or some of them even, Agenda 2020, or, Future 2020, I think I heard once. But they're all working towards 2020 or 2030. So that date kind of just rang in my head right there when it said who graduated in 2020. 2020 has seemed to have been the date that everyone has been talking about, we need these things rolled out by 2020. This is our goal by 2020. One of the cities near me, their agenda is to get people to move into the city, and they're basically using tax dollars to do all of this work to basically give rich people the opportunity to bring their business to downtown and bring people to move in. And their goal is to reach, over 1 million by 2020. And what you're finding is that the most wealthy people are trying to get out of the big city. So we should maybe kind of look at, if you live in a city or near a city, that if these goals are being, rolled out. It says here, need an antidote? Listen to Micro, famous from Dirty Jobs, talk about our screwed up, overpriced college system and the value of trade jobs. Mind you, Emmanuel's proposal is friendly to teens pursuing trades, but with the government's oversight and veto power over what pursuing a post-school trade actually looks like. And there's a video, if you go to reason.com, Dirty Jobs, Micro on the High Cost of College full interview. Check that out. Now, I've been saying for a long time that they've been working really hard to what I like to call demature the young adults. Instead of allowing young adults to mature in attitude, and they've been working extremely hard to say, you're still a kid. I mean, they're hitting, 28, 29, 30 and going, whoa, I gotta grow up. So when you look at it, it goes along with that whole dumb down the youth. And really, I woke up to it years ago, but it still was a shock. It still is a shock. I don't understand the lack of knowledge. Like, these people can be, I can figure out a math problem, yay, but really cannot, see reality. You can literally go tell, a TV network host on mainstream media or a host of one of these morning shows to state something as fact. These people will absolutely believe it. No critical thinking, no questioning. They're good direction followers. So they probably could, do something that a critical thinker, as they're doing it, would go, there's something wrong here, where these people just do it like a robot. So when you look at this, it goes along with that. We got to continue to program them. And that the longer they stay immature, the longer that they can program them. They're more influenced as they don't allow their mind to mature. And then what we're talking, most people get set in their ways, get set in what they believe, and won't look at things when they get older. Not all people. I know plenty of people that, they question things, they question what they believe all the time. There's people that I know that believed one thing and now believe something else just because, you know, there's enough pattern here that they believe this now, and they're older. But then I also know older ones that if you even brought up something different, oh no, you don't know what you're talking. They don't want to hear it. They're set in their way. They don't care. They just want to believe what they believe. We don't know history if we believe that we need to treat young adults as children. We don't know what our own ancestors accomplished, at what age they accomplished. Oh, we live longer now. Not totally true. It depends on what time period you're talking about, and what was going on during that time period. But it doesn't matter how long we live. Does that, if we live longer, we should be immature longer? The youth still has that ambition, and they used to be able to funnel it towards a future. Now they got to funnel it towards partying one night and studying, you know, the next morning, cramming for a quiz and then party. Copy paste. That's what I always like to call it. When I was in high school and college, I would copy paste. Read here. Here's a worksheet, fill in the blank. Copy paste. A lot of times I didn't do homework. I just took the test. Passed the test, you pass the class, whatever. It was unbelievable. Copy paste. And you know, it's amazing to see anymore when we see someone at a young age. Oh, they're 16, 15, and they created something that they're making money off of. Oh my, they must be a genius. No, they probably had the opportunity to explore their ideas. At the same time, you know, I've seen people go, you know, that's pretty cool, but at the same time, you know, their kids are not allowed to do really anything, not explore. Then they want to act out. Why are they acting out? Because you basically put them in a box and tell them don't do anything. They might act out. I don't know. We have to, and that doesn't mean you don't keep your children safe. You just give them the opportunity to explore their own imagination, their own, you know, their own skills and gifts. You'd be amazed. Okay, what time do we have here? Okay, we got plenty of time here. Okay. I'm going to move on to one here from We Are Change. If I don't have to restart the browser, I shouldn't have to here. It should be good. I have one here, Luke Radowski. He interviewed former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, and she goes off about DynCorp. And I wanted to cover this. I might play the whole thing. I don't know. Let's go ahead and dive into it here real quick before we burn up time.
Radowski of WeAreChange.org. And as you know, rarely ever do we do Skype interviews, but today you guys are in for a very special treat. We are joined by an incredible, amazing human being, the one and only Cynthia McKinney. She served 6 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the great state of Georgia. But most importantly, she not only kicked some major ass in Congress, she is now an activist and doing really incredible work. And in this video, we're going to be getting into very serious topics that need to be discussed, but yet so many people are afraid to talk about these issues. And Cynthia, I really wanted to talk to you about the latest supposed Trump efforts that he announced last month, where he said he was going to combat human trafficking. You tweeted that video of him announcing that, and you said, forewarning, this brings down Democrats and Republicans. He needs to go straight all the way because this goes all the way to the top. Cynthia, amazing bravery from you always. Can you explain what you meant by that tweet for the audience who isn't looped into what we know?
Well, basically, human trafficking is like a scourge that has overtaken the, I don't like to use the word elite, but has overtaken the, how can I say, the decision makers, the policy makers, basically in too many countries around the world. And I don't know if it's that this is a part of the requirement to join an elite political body, or if it's just something that happens as a result of being in power and then becoming, more craven with your power. But we've got instances that have been documented, of course, of United Nations, sexual trafficking, human trafficking, sexual slavery, and also the situation with DynCorp. And so here we know what happened, we know what continues to happen, and yet there seems to be this air of impunity. Now, with respect to what DynCorp and other corporations that are part of the military-industrial complex are, how can I say, they are engaged in, is something that, for example, when I grilled Donald Rumsfeld about DynCorp, and he said, well, there are some companies that can get out of the penalty box, but DynCorp was never taken out of the penalty box. They were never put in the penalty box. And so the one has to assume that the behavior continues. And of course, we've seen most recently with the situation in Haiti, but arrests that have taken place around the world, that sexual slavery, human trafficking is basically a scourge that people in power have, maybe it's a nefarious taste that people in power have developed. Mm-hmm. Therefore, what I believe needs to happen is if Trump actually says that he's going to go after human traffickers, then he needs to do that. And unfortunately, we haven't seen much action. We've seen the talk, but we haven't seen much action. And I'm quite frankly waiting for the action. In fact, what just recently happened in Haiti was 30 young girls were rescued from human traffickers, and the human traffickers were released. No prosecution, no nothing. We know from the WikiLeaks documents that a previous instance of trafficking of Haitian children was attempted, but the Haitian authorities stepped in and actually made arrests. And the Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Clinton, intervened to help the so-called missionary, which was basically just a human trafficker.
And many people don't know about this, but this seems to be a reoccurring problem. I mean, we had the Franklin cover-up. We have people like Jeffrey Epstein, the Jimmy Savile. We have the mainstream media, including the BBC, covering up and lying, protecting people who abuse little children. And this is an issue that for some reason, it should be a common sense issue. You don't do this to other human beings, but the left and right have been very afraid to even touch this issue. And we're finally getting some clairvoyance from people on the internet who are saying, wait, let's actually look into this. Let's actually investigate this. People who have to be brave enough to do this because you get ostracized and finger pointed like you're some kind of crazy person. No, this is documented. This stuff actually does happen, and it needs to be put on the record. And I think one of the ballsiest things that has inspired me to confront politicians was when you confronted Donald Rumsfeld on the DynCorp contracts, the military contracts that they were given still to that military contractor when they were caught selling and trading women and children as sex slaves. This is incredible. We're going to play that clip right now.
I watched President Bush deliver a moving speech at the United Nations in September 2003, in which he mentioned the crisis of the sex trade. The president called for the punishment of those involved in this horrible business. But at the very moment of that speech, DynCorp was exposed for having been involved in the buying and selling of young women and children. While all of this was going on, DynCorp kept the Pentagon contract to administer the smallpox and anthrax vaccines and is now working on a plague vaccine through the Joint Vaccine Acquisition Program. Mr. Secretary, is it policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls?
Thank you, Representative.
This was one of the videos that inspired me to go out there and confront politicians when I saw someone as brave as Cynthia McKinney do it. Now, DynCorp is a very serious, major military contractor. Now, we know Donald Trump did say that he does want to combat child trafficking efforts, but his Deputy Department Homeland Security official is a former DynCorp employee. DynCorp still gets contracts within the U.S. military. They should have been blacklisted. They should have been thrown in jail. Cynthia, can you give us more context on DynCorp and why are they still in business when they were caught so many damn times doing awful things to other human beings?
Well, I asked a question of Donald Rumsfeld, 12 years ago or so, and nothing happened. So clearly, this kind of behavior is a part of the new normal that we are supposed to accept. I will never accept it. And unfortunately, though, this kind of behavior has proliferated instead of being tamped down or drawn in. And that's how you get from a situation of DynCorp and the United Nations and the peacekeepers and all of the things that have happened over there in that sort of ball of wax. You go from there to Lolita Express and Orgy Island. And the fact that we have a president and a secretary of state who have been documented as having been engaged with this person on multiple occasions is cause for question. Not only question, cause for investigation. Of course, I follow the Jeffrey Epstein situation because well, we've had our own situations with allegations of prostitutes, and we've got the DC matter. We've got several members of Congress who were actually caught up in questionable behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that one, Jeffrey Epstein gets off so lightly that over 100 Jane Does are forced to file a lawsuit to say, hey, what happened? Why was he released? Why was his sentence so short? Why was he basically given a slap on the wrist when my whole life has been turned upside down by the activities of this man? But not only that, there's no investigation. The only glimmer of hope that we have is that this lawsuit that's been filed by these James will proceed in the courts. But unfortunately, the person who gave Epstein the slap on the wrist has now become, I believe, the Secretary of Labor in the Trump administration.
Wow.
We've got the, former CEO of DynCorp now in the Trump administration. So instead of draining the swamp, particularly on human trafficking, basically the swamp is being replenished.
I'm happy you're seeing it from a different kind of point of view, because I know there's been a lot of kind of enthusiasm and a lot of kind of hope towards Donald Trump, because he did talk a good game. He did talk about exposing Saudi Arabia. He did talk about auditing the Federal Reserve. Some people are saying it's too early to judge him yet. What do you think? What do you think of Donald Trump so far as president of the United States?
These are the same arguments that I heard in 2009 after Barack Obama was sworn into office. And so basically what I see happening is the same kind of rose-colored glasses. Oh, we got to give him some time. Oh, we can't criticize him. Oh, we can't expect him to keep all of his promises. Oh, this, oh, that. And so Barack Obama and his administration was allowed to degenerate into killing more people on the planet than I ever thought was even possible for a U.S. president, and Barack Obama did that. And he did that with the eyes open of the so-called progressive community, the Democratic Party stalwarts, people who are the rank and file Democratic Party members, became cheerleaders every time a bomb was dropped by Barack Obama. I've never seen anything like that before. And I hope that I don't witness a revisit of this kind of behavior from the other side of the spectrum.
We're always finding out, and I think more people are finding out more and more now. The truth is not on the left, it's not on the right. It shatters all those paradigms together, and you are definitely the perfect example of that. I mean, you had both the Democrats and the Republicans working to kick you out of office because you were such a threat to the whole entire establishment. They're like, holy cow, we're going to have to come together on this, and they did, because you threatened their big authority. It's not left and right, it's up and down, and people need to start paying attention so we could really deal with these damn issues. And I want to thank you, Cynthia, for being such a brave human being, having the gall and the fearlessness to actually do this. And most importantly, I just want to say, how are you? What are you doing? Where are you? What's going on with your life? I'm so curious about everything that's going on with you right now as well.
Yeah, well, I'm all the way another planet away, basically. I'm on the other side of the planet. I'm in Asia, and I am teaching young people how to be critical thinkers and hopefully how to start movements and how to be revolutionaries. So, and why is it revolutionary to demand accountability from your government? Why is it revolutionary to expect that your elected officials will tell you the truth and that they will actually do what they say they're going to do during the campaign? Why is that revolutionary? I don't think it's revolutionary. I think it's responsible. I think it's being a human being. And of course, we're taught the difference between right and wrong all throughout our lives. And now there's one theorist, by the way, I need to mention, I can't remember his name, but his theory, he's invented this new word called kakistocracy. And basically what he says is that now, unfortunately, people all over the world are have their political institutions populated by the absolute worst people. They're the most incompetent. They're the least committed. They are the most unprincipled people. Those are the ones who have found their way to the top, not necessarily the psychopaths or the sociopaths, but just people who are unprincipled, uncommitted, uneducated, uncaring, and somehow we've allowed that to happen. This kakistocracy, this the existence of this phenomenon basically around the world, I think it's something that goes with indirect democracy. And so I've begun to consider moving toward systems of direct democracy. This is, of course, what Libya had in the Jamahiriya before the Western countries began to try and dismantle the Jamahiriya, and actually successfully did. But there were efforts prior to the bombing to dismantle the direct democracy. And so, of course, we know Switzerland has direct democracy. Nigel Farage now has said that the UKIP is going to be committed to direct democracy. People in Ireland have a movement for direct democracy. And I think that we need to look at changing the political system. Why should I give up my sovereignty that I have and give it to someone whom later I have to beg to do the right thing by me? The whole system doesn't make sense. And that is the system of indirect democracy, which has been touted to be the highest form of democratic practice and democratic exercise. But all of that is propaganda. And basically what indirect democracy does is it allows those who have the money, those who have the power to buy off the legislatures around the world and work their will through a minority of people. That has got to stop. And I think direct democracy is an issue that we need to put into the common parlance as we discuss political systems of the future. I hope that wasn't too bookish.
Hallelujah. I am with you 100% on those ideas and concepts. And that was Max Egan, who was talking about kakistocracy. I was just with him in Mexico. And last year in Mexico at the same place, we did a whole video just on that topic alone and just that definition of that word. And Cynthia, I'm going to join you in Asia. We're going to teach some young kids what's really going on, how to help them. I'm offering my services. I'll probably be there in a month. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being an incredible, brave, fearless human being who's not willing to stand down against these punks. No matter what happens, you're always there, always fighting for common sense.
We are change. We are change.org. We are change on YouTube. Check it out. Watch the full video there. And I don't always agree with her on everything, but I think that she was definitely in tune to the corruption on both sides, that she does try to critically think things. Doesn't mean we always agree on everything, but when you're critically thinking, you might not look at everything always the same, but you really have to look at the character of a person. Are they going, we need more government to intrude on your life, or, we need government to protect the rights. Those tend to be, she would have been more of the, if government's going to be here, it needs to protect rights, not, elitist. Doesn't mean that, we need all this government that she might have wanted, but I think that we should look at a common goal, definitely when it comes to we do have this humongous government, and you still have companies like DynCorp that are still major government contractors. You know, when this whole, you know, Podesta email came out, and they're trying to make, you know, I'm not even going to get into all the fake news about it, but you know, it brought up the whole, you know, child trafficking, and you know, I've tried to look into this. It's a minefield of information, and trying to bounce around from all the fake news and trying to find the real stuff and the real connections, and it's a minefield. And what you tend to find is the accountability is always kind of shadowed. There's never a lot of information on it. When you do have people say, I'm going to come out and, you know, speak truth, or, you know, tell everybody what's really going on, or, you know, all this, what ends up happening is they end up killing themselves, or, you know, it's so suspicious. And then when you have these mega corporations that are kind of shadowy themselves, that are caught doing this, but then are very integrated into the government through government contracts, you have to question, are we holding people accountable, or are we, you know, benefiting off of their connections? You know, well, you know, we got to get along with this guy because even though he's a dictator, you know, you know the typical story that we get from government. When they do, you know, why are we, you know, allies with Saudi Arabia if they commit the same atrocities that we were fighting against the Taliban in Afghanistan? You know, look how they treat their women. So does Saudi Arabia. But we're not, you know, trying to wage, which I'm not, you know, declaring, hey, let's go wage war against some more countries. Opposite of that, I'm saying don't try to justify it one place when it happens with your allies. Don't be the hypocrite. And we kind of tend to be that if we're allowing government to, you know, say, oh, you know, we're against this, but we contract with companies that have been caught doing it. Oh, it was rogue. Well, it happened. Even if it was rogue, you probably should just cut ties. If there's this mega corporation, they'll find work doing something. But you should probably watch out and see what they're doing work with. It's becoming a pretty unbelievable world out there. You know, when reality is so in your face anymore, and then the propaganda is so in your face, it's another world. But it's also another world when you see how crazy the thought process in a lot of people have become. you know, you watch all these on the street ones that, you know, for example, Mark Dice, he does a lot of the on the street get-ups that, you know, the thinking process seems to have kind of broke down. If I can get this here. Okay, sorry. Just trying to bring up this one. Since we were talking about legalization and, you know, something that Ron Paul's brought up before, I wanted to cover this little on the street from Adam Kokesh. How can you say weed should be legal but not all drugs?
That and everything. I'm from Los Angeles, but I'm here in Las Vegas because we're representing the Green Vegas Project, which is we're doing crowdfunding from the general public in support of having responsible research, development, and licensing of cannabis sightseeing companies here in Las Vegas, particularly the Green Strip Wellness Crawl. That's the main company, but it's about bringing responsible tourism here to Las Vegas, sightseeing tourism. Hey, you know what? Have an open mind. Just because you don't necessarily smoke yourself, be open-minded. It might be something you do that the next person don't do, and I'm sure you're going to want them to have an open mind as well. So just be open-minded, you know what I mean? Don't condemn anyone for something you don't necessarily condone.
Well, speaking of being open-minded, a lot of people today, now that marijuana has become so widespread and acceptable, are like okay with that because they see people doing it, they hear people, you know, having positive experiences with it for medical purposes. But do you support the legalization of all drugs?
No, because some drugs have such an adverse effect, not only to the body chemically, but they also have a direct effect on people's home lives. You know what I mean?
Shouldn't people get to decide that for themselves? Same with marijuana?
Well, I think when you have people that are involuntary to or subject to what's going on, like, for instance, someone who uses cocaine, if they go into a violent rage and the kids are in the house, now the person using the cocaine, true, they can have that decision to use it for themselves, but their actions directly affect
so the actions are different from the drugs, though, because like alcohol can lead people to violence too, right? So are you saying that by that logic, alcohol should be illegal?
Well, to a certain extent, I think there's situations where all of it, if not used responsibly, that's the key word.
So shouldn't we make the irresponsible part illegal? Like make it illegal to hit someone, not make it illegal to drink a beer?
I think accountability is more what needs to be.
So can't we let all drugs be legal and just hold people accountable for their actual actions that would harm people?
Exactly. I think now that, believe it or not, is not a bad idea in my opinion. If you could do what you do and it doesn't have an adverse effect to your home life, your children, the people around you, animals, nature, it doesn't have a bio-adverse effect, I mean, it doesn't matter. Do what you do as long as the after effect does not negatively, adversely affect anyone.
So are you saying that you would support the legalization of all drugs if we had a better system for holding people accountable for when they do bad things on drugs?
Kinda, yeah. Because I really don't,
in the privacy of your own home, right?
Do what you do. Yeah. But don't get all high off your drugs and harm your kids, hurt your dog, stand outside and hurt the general public. We didn't ask for that. You know, your kids didn't ask for it. They can't defend themselves against that. So whatever drug you choose to do, make sure you can handle your drug. And the minute you're not responsible with the drug you use, you should be held fully accountable for that.
Right. See, part of the problem with the drug war in the first place, I mean, why marijuana was illegal or is in the semi-illegal now, right, is that the people gave government the right to decide, the power.
It gave itself the power.
Good point.
A system like the electoral vote as opposed to the popular vote.
Generally speaking, the American people support the war on drugs, or did, and as it was being ramped up, right?
Right. I mean, it's one thing to support the war on drugs. I get it, but don't tell me we could put somebody on the moon. We can send a satellite around Pluto and measure the temperature, but you can't stop a boat from coming over here full of dope. Come on, man.
Well, the reason I think this is so important is that we're experiencing not just a widespread acceptance of marijuana in the United States, but a psychedelics renaissance, and people are realizing that mushrooms and LSD and DMT, so many other drugs,
tropic drugs, right there,
and they have really positive therapeutic effects.
They can. They can. I've done some research, not a lot. Don't quote me, but I've done some, and I've seen where it unlocks parts of the brain. I'm not sure if it's good to unlock some people's brains. Some brains need to stay thoroughly locked. But seriously, I've heard that it does unlock different parts of the brain. I think under a controlled environment, a controlled clinical environment, proper study and research is done. I think proper responsibility and accountability should be in place. And I think a legitimate, non-biased penal system should be in place. A system where cops can I throw this in? I know it's sleaze. Shouldn't it be that anyone who has anything to do with the production of laws, the authority to carry out laws, shouldn't they be held to at least 5 times the criminal penalty for anything that they do that would be a civilian would do? Say spouse abuse from a cop, shouldn't he be held to 5 times the penalty?
I think it's kind of arbitrary. If everybody's held accountable for their damages, I think that would be fair enough. But let me ask, wouldn't it be more appropriate to say, if there's a victim, then you have a crime. If there's no victim, there's no crime, right?
If a tree falls in the woods and nobody see it or hear it, did it make a sound?
So you're saying, well, if you do it in the privacy of your own home, it almost doesn't matter because, like, Fourth Amendment privacy, right?
Well, crime is crime. Whether it's in the home or out in public, crime is crime.
But if you don't hurt anybody, is it a crime?
Well, it depends on what's considered hurt. Who constitutes what hurt is? The victim or the aggressor?
Well, if there's no victim, there's no crime, right?
Well, they haven't found a lot of dead bodies. Doesn't mean that a crime hasn't been committed.
All right, fair enough. Now, that's not actually the surprise subject. Here it is. You said earlier when you saw my tattoo that said USMC, thank you for your service. What did you mean by that? Thank you so much, sir.
No problem.
Hey, let me hit you up one more because you know what? I probably cost you another sale.
Adam Kokesh on YouTube. Check him out. Now, a lot of times what you see when you challenge people on this, you do find a lot of people that are pro marijuana. Where you go, well, shouldn't we legalize all drugs? Well, no. Well, why? Well, because those drugs, that drug might harm you. Oh, you don't ever hear about people, what do you do about alcohol? Should we make prohibition again? Well, no. So aren't we doing the same with these other drugs? Does it not help fund actual criminal activity rather than try to bring it into an environment that it can be studied and controlled better, where people know what they're getting, know what they're doing, aren't hurting themselves and people around them? And some people really do that sparks something in them. They're like, I never thought about it like that. And I'm not saying people need to go out and do the drugs, but they're already doing the drugs. And because, one drug that has been very, very harmful across, the nation and the world, it's spread maybe not as much as it has in a lot of parts of America. What I really, my research into you know, how this drug is spread, meth, what you see is meth has really went into these towns that were industrial towns. They might have not had extremely large, you know, factories, but they had a lot of pretty, you know, mid-size factories. They might have not been, you know, 4 square mile factories, but they were, you know, they might have took up a block or a half a block, and they had quite a few of them, and they were producing, and all of a sudden, you know, they're all gone, all of them. And it was a perfect storm. And a lot of this happened in middle America or flyover nation. The Midwest, you know, some parts of the South, and it really affected a lot of communities. And now, because they have regulated the hell out of a lot of the stuff that they used to make it with, a lot of these drug makers, or whatever you would call them, are making what they're calling meth, but a lot of people tell you it's not. It's just chemicals. You know, when I was doing the research on it, that's when I found out that, you know, and when I started the research, this was years ago, and I found out that, you know, meth was something that you could buy at the drugstore, and it was, you know, a pharmaceutical grade type meth, and, you know, there were housewives that used to, you know, take it and then, you know, go about cleaning the house and making sure everything's done. And even though you did hear about, you know, some, you know, people having problems with it, it wasn't the majority. Now you hear about someone doing meth, they're stuck on it, they're, you know, dying, you know, it's eating them from the inside out, and a lot of times it's not even meth. We already know what alcohol prohibition has done. We know what government regulation does. We know what it does to business. We know what it does to society. And the biggest, you know, fallacy that the elites have pulled over a lot of the population's eyes is that, you know, the whole reason for all these issues is we haven't had enough government. We didn't do it good enough. But all that spells is a more police state, authoritarian, Orwellian, you know, no privacy type society. And there's some people out there that they're okay with that. But those people don't speak for everyone, nor do they have a right to take those rights away from people. What does our future hold when you cannot color outside the lines? And, you know, there's been people that have been in powerful positions to say, maybe not a position that they hold power, but position that they they know what's going on, a position that they mingle with the people that are helping pull strings. They might even help pull strings. They've been in Hollywood. They've been authors. They've been artists. They've been, you know, so many different things. And there's been enough of them that have been willing to put a warning out there. You have choices. You have paths. Is this what you want? Is this how far you're willing to go to achieve your goal? And I don't know if people really realize what they're asking for when they're asking for government regulation and control. An authoritarian system. But if we don't speak out now, it's just going to continue to grow. But I think there is an awakening. I always hold on hope for it. And every chance we get to make a difference, we need to take it. And I think, again, it starts with our youth. Everybody knows I'm a big homeschool or tutoring type, you know, something other than the same brainwashing that you get from public schools. And a lot of private schools have even now gone to the same, you know, everything that you get from public school, you know. Maybe if it's a religious private school, you might get the classes on religion. Other than that, it's the same. But, you know, we have to start with the youth because they're not being allowed to. If you're in Chicago, I'd probably urge get your kids out of Chicago before, you know, they're stuck to the system where, you know, they won't get what's rightfully theirs if they don't go to the school. What if you have a kid that's already starting a company? That won't count. No matter what, they earned it once they're through high school. Now the public school has no authority over that. They have to hand that over. And there's already been, you know, times where high schools try to withhold it for one reason or another that wasn't quite, you know, legal. It wasn't like they didn't pass. They weren't there for the right attendance. They should have got it. And they basically had to threaten them with the court case, and they give it to them. That's happened before. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in. We are at the end of the broadcast. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV. Great broadcast coming up right after this. And don't forget to go UCY.TV, scroll down to the bottom, click that Amazon button, shop Amazon through UCY.TV, get the same great price, same great shipping rate, and at the same time, UCY gets a little kickback to help cover operating costs. Again, thank you for tuning in tonight, and stay tuned here on UCY.TV. Again, great broadcast coming up right after this. And don't forget, you know, always pass the truth along to the youth, because if they are full of fake information and don't know the reality of things, they will be easily programmed by people that don't want them to know the truth. Stay tuned.